Hello, everyone. My name is Hannah Livingston, and this is my reading ladder presentation. My theme that I chose across all of my texts is art as therapy and literature, so let's dive in. So there's going to be seven texts that we go over in this unit. The first is going to be a TED Talk, Art as Empowerment. Number two is going to be a song by Joni Mitchell called For Free. Number three is going to be an ekphrastic poem by Eric Zhang Yao. Number four is going to be our canonical text, which is Girl Interrupted by Susanna Kaysen. Number five is our in-class text, which is Ordinary Hazards by Nikki Grimes. Number six is actually going to be a song sequence by Kansas. The three songs are Mysteries and Mayhem, The Pinnacle, and Carry On Wayward Son. And number seven is going to be a film, Speak, 2004 film directed by Catherine Hardwicke, starring Kristen Stewart. So the learning objectives that we're going to go over in this unit, obviously, we're going to be analyzing the text for common thematic connections and messages, discuss and support position for the questions posed for each text, form an opinion on art as therapy and the process of art therapy as depicted by each author, develop a sharper research skill set, really just to like support your position and be able to back up your thoughts. Participate in art therapy as themselves or as a character. People have the option if they don't want to get too deep into their own stuff, they can go ahead and pretend to be one of the characters. It's a fun way to really kind of do the art therapy, come up with a cool, cool project. Um, then we identify or invent new ways to create art. So just, what new mediums can we come up with? How can we be more creative? How can we apply that to our therapeutic process? Um, how can that be a therapeutic process for us? Understand the varying mediums of art and artistry can fall under and how they affect the message and theme of a text. So the medium affects the message. Understand the different mechanics and identifiable criteria for each text modality. Properly communicate and debate opinions on each text and the overall theme of the unit in a respectful manner. Um, Obviously we can't have people being rude to each other, and complete art therapy projects, one group project and one individual project. So before we would really dive in, we would go over, as the first part of the lesson, we would go over mental health, kind of have these base questions, which are going to be kind of like, hey, form your own opinion on what you think about mental health and what you think is important regarding mental health. And do you really know what good and bad mental health looks like? And since this is aimed at like 12th grade students, they should kind of be able to have a little bit more of a sophisticated idea since they are a little bit older, have been reading a little bit longer, and as we go through the books and everything, mental health will continue to be, um, or as we go through the text, I'm sorry, mental health will continue to be a really big topic. And then we're also going to talk about like therapy, like what is therapy? What does therapy mean to us? Like, do we know things about therapy? Do we have any prior knowledge? Do we know anybody who's been through it? Really kind of what what do we already know and what do we think we know and can we back that up, which is also part of the research, um, sharpening those research skills. And then another thing is going to be that phrase, it's therapeutic, and that's a really big thing with like having a hobby and having like a creative outlet. We're going to go through that a lot in this unit plan. And then also like what is art, because art is a very subjective form to everybody. Some people really only think of art in like the traditional sense of like drawing, paints, all of that. Other people think of it in, they think of stuff like woodworking and everything as a form of art. So that will be a really good, this will be a really good baseline to kind of see where everybody's at and what they think about art. And so really like the overarching theme and consideration is art as therapy and how authors and artists use their art to kind of like go through points in time in their lives and deal with things in their lives and use their art as a means to get all of that out of their system or to find a way to put that away so they can continue. So the main question everybody is going to be asking over the entire course of the entire unit is going to be, how do these artists use their craft to express their trauma, triumph, and transformation? Um, that's going to be a really big question for everybody to consider for every text. And there's going to be some projects that go along with it that are going to be crafting, hands-on. So it's going to be a lot of participation and then two major projects for the unit plan and for students. So these are going to be the initial questions we want to consider before really going into and diving into art therapy and kind of the different nuances of art as therapy. So, just kind of like, what are your initial thoughts? And again, these are all going to be very subjective. It's going to be more survey-esque, where it's like, we kind of want to know what you guys think, and then please develop more opinions as we go on. And really, it's going to be, I want all students to really think about these questions and think about them in the sense of the text and just come up with their own opinion, because there really is no right or wrong. Um, they're going to get from it what they get from it and how they believe the author used this artwork as a form of therapy. So, how do you feel using art as a coping tool? Do you think art therapy is beneficial at all? Can you think of like 3 options of art therapy, like outside of traditional painting or drawing? Like what do you really think about this stuff? Things to really start thinking about. So our first text is going to be this TED Talk on YouTube. TED is, obviously then here all the good stuff. It's a nonprofit. It applies a multidisciplinary framework to its cause, allowing the most obscure and the most basic ideas to be shared. It's really about education and giving different opinions on nuanced topics and new perspectives on nuanced topics. And that's going to be a lot of what we're trying to do in this unit as well. And this text the jumping off point into kind of like the scientific side of art therapy, and it kind of show that there is like there's a measurable difference whenever you can do stuff like this to kind of deal with like experiences that you've had. So it's a way to kind of make sure that we don't discount before we start, and it's a way to also, as we get through it, it's a way to kind of help develop the mindset that any student's going to need to have. So the essential questions we want to ask: does culture affect our view on art and making art? What are your thoughts on the results of the therapy? On the results of the therapy as mentioned in the video? Have you ever participated in art therapy? How? What medium? Have you ever used art as therapy? How do we create a therapeutic space for expression? And that means, like in the sense of like peer-to-peer. And then does expression require skill? Do you think anything worth doing is worth doing badly? These are all kind of going to be precursors for the philosophical idea of, we're not really judging how good your art is. We're not really judging how good your therapy is. We are just looking at how you apply the technique and what you get and what you can gain from applying that technique and using art as a therapeutic method. And, we're going to be going over each and every text and kind of like the mechanics of the text and why it's, why that part of literature is important, what it brings, what it means for art as a whole. So this is going to be art as empowerment. This is a public oratory. This is, a speech, passionate speech. And this is more of the scientific side, anecdotal side of watching this person as a art therapist, seeing her patients. And so moving on to number 2, we have our song for free by Joni Mitchell. Mitchell discusses the idea of playing for free while she listens to a man play the piano on the street. It explores themes of like class opportunity and asking ourselves why we should create. And this is all really important for like talking about art as therapy and art therapy in general, because it's like so many people have this idea that art has to be some type of way and it has to be good in order to do it. And that's not true, because anything worth doing is doing badly. So this is going to be kind of a little more philosophical side, where it's like, really, are we gatekeeping art? Does it have to be a certain way? Or do we really just need to make sure the form is a certain way and go from there? And does that form inform the message? But we have, some essential questions. Should people play for free? What does it mean to be artistic? Have we ever ignored art or artists because of its class? And really here we would focus on that second verse. Has a lot of, money and being at the top and being at the bottom, and kind of that dichotomy of you have to be at the very top or at the very bottom in order to be considered successful with having art. And we kind of want to like shove away the idea of needing to be successful with art and just thinking about doing it and how it can be beneficial, um, and how the texts demonstrate that. And the great thing about this song is that it is a little bit older too, so not like maybe not everybody knows it, but lyrics are up there. There's a contemporary version, temporary cover by Lana Del Rey, which is amazing, and then we have the original version. And we would listen to both of these versions and kind of compare as well and see if there's any like shift or change, um, in kind of the song's tone because of the differences. So our third is going to be Art Therapy. It's an ekphrastic poem by Eric Tan Zhang Yao. And this text is really important because it's probably the shortest text. It comes right after kind of analyzing traditional poetry in the sense of like Joni Mitchell's rhyme and everything in her song. This is going to be the ekphrastic poetry. This is going to be it's going to be a little different than traditional poetic mechanics. So it's going to be a good way to kind of introduce some of those finer, more higher level mechanics and kind of how we want the analysis to start. Um, but also this is the most recent publication, so it's actually probably most up to date. So it's probably going to be a lot more accessible to students than it, you know, maybe than like for free would be. But that's okay because the reason why we do all these different things is kind of show how things change and how things don't change and how some things stay the same across all artwork. Possibly, we'll see. So essential questions for this are going to be like, what inventive ideas? Because this is a very evocative form, this is going to be a lot more for teaching like, how to use imagery and how to use vivid imagery with your words and with your picture choices and with the medium that you're going to be using. So it's going to be kind of more meditating on like, how do we make this artistic, even if it's not like technically skilled? We don't have this technical skill we would like to have. Um, and why is this like expressive freedom important in creating therapeutic art and using art in a therapeutic way? Like, because, there's a ton of answers to that question. There's a ton of answers to all of these questions, and they're all important because they will all build on that medium and they will all build on the idea of like, how does this imagery make you feel? How do you want it to feel? And can you evoke an emotion with words or images pretty well? Do you kind of understand what you're doing, even if the image or doesn't look the exact way you would like? And that's kind of what we're going for here. So moving on to number 4 is Girl Interrupted by Susanna Kaysen. This is actually considered the canonical text in this unit, and the reason being is because this is actually probably like the OG therapy book, like book about people being human beings in a mental institution and dealing kind of with their own mental unrest. Um, and Susanna, she spent this time, she's here, she's going to Claymore because she tried to commit suicide. This is one of the more controversial texts because there is going to be a lot of offensive stuff in it. There's going to be a lot of offense in the sense that like you have people that are homosexual and they're being put into a mental institution. Not cool. You have other people in mental institution making fun of other people's ailments. You have people who bully people who are sexual abuse survivors. Um, so it's really going to work as a way to deconstruct the romanticism around like bad mental health and the stigmas around mental health that still exist, and kind of how far we've come, because this is from a different time period, and we're also following kind of a more privileged person. So this isn't really a perspective that we would get from somebody who was underprivileged, and we can talk about how that kind of influences Susanna's journey and her journey with her art and how it helps her possibly out of Claymore. So the essential questions, because this is going to very much focus on like nonfiction and like how nonfiction works really well in a therapeutic way if we're trying to be artistic and if we're trying to make our art good. And even if we're not trying to make our art good, like why is nonfiction really a good thing to kind of work through? So it's going to be a lot of like, how is Susanna's voice distinct? Like, can you really hear her talking to you? Do you think nonfiction is good, or would you prefer to be a character? Do you like, can we authentically own our pain without letting it destroy us? Can we be a character and still own all of that authentically? Does our trauma define us? Does it push us forward? Is it like the catalyst for our life? Does it infantilize us? Like, these are all really good questions to ask with this book. And there's also, because there's like, drug use and smoking and everything in it, that is a little bit more of why I would like to use it for the older grade, because, you know, there's so many different ways to consume nicotine now. It would be a good way to have a conversation about that as well. Just because these are things we have to have conversations about. We can't pretend like these aren't happening with our youth and everything. So we have to make sure that these conversations are being had, and that this is what literature is here for, to start with those conversations. And it's a good way to talk about it through art therapy. What if there's somebody already addicted to nicotine? They're trying to get over it. It's a great way to work through it artistically. Therapy through art. Win-win. So moving on to number 5 is Ordinary Hazards by Nikki Grimes. This is probably going to be the hardest book because, Girl Interrupted is adults and everything, and there's really only like one or two really sad situations when it comes to sexual abuse. When it comes to Ordinary Hazards, there's a lot more going on. There's a lot more neglect. There's a lot more just really visceral, difficult trauma, getting separated from your parents, having to go live with strangers, feeling out of place, um, you know, being the lower class outcast and having to overcome so many more obstacles at such a younger age. Um, but it's really good because this book is very hopeful despite all of that. And so it kind of has this hopeful message and this emphasis on being childlike. And that's kind of a running theme through everything. Like, keep that part of your childhood that keeps your imagination going and keeps you wanting to be creative, because it does feed your soul and kind of get you out of these darker places. It doesn't, it's not an immediate fix, and it's not a quick fix, and it's not a permanent fix. It's an everyday thing, but it does have use and value in our lives outside of entertainment. And some essential questions to ask are like, how does this text further inform the idea of art therapy? And, do we think that like it's more important after this book? Because this book really kind of goes into a lot of like why it's so important, for the main character at the very least. And this book is also a memoir, but it's written with like poetry as prose. So it's going to be a good differentiation between Girl Interrupted as well, because, the way the characters' perspectives are completely switched. They're two completely different ages, races, dealing with different situations entirely, different socioeconomic classes. So it's going to be a good way to compare and contrast and kind of see how Susanna deals with her struggles versus how Nikki deals with her struggles, um, because of the different backgrounds they come from. So it's a really good way to also like be mindful of all the backgrounds other people come from, and maybe just be cool with how they want to do their artwork and what they think about art and how therapy and art therapy makes them feel. And does having family members and trustworthy figures supporting your creativity make a difference? Do we have those really good teachers? Do you believe that there's magic in your identity and owning your identity? A big part of Nikki's life is owning her blackness and like seeing just how elegant and amazing being black is. And black creativity. It's a big thing for her. And already compared the class comparisons and do we have an obligation to keep our family traumas as secrets? Because it's a big thing in this novel as well. Or is it just as much ours to share as it is everybody else's? It's something we bear together. And that's a really big thing that a lot of artists actually do get in trouble for is they out family secrets and they weren't supposed to. So that's something we can talk about as far as like how art therapy kind of pushes the envelope and, what ethical issues will we have there if it's not entirely our story to tell? And, should we really even tell this story to everybody? Does it belong to us after that? Who knows? That's a question everybody's got to consider. So moving on, we have a song sequence. This is different than just Joni Mitchell's song because this song sequence tells a whole story from, before you have this crazy realization, during the crazy realization of like, I'm transcending and transforming this horrible thing that I've gone through into something amazing, and then the aftermath of that and kind of the affirmation that you have to have with that. And the reason why I chose Kansas as well is because, these songs are really awesome. It's actually like 20 minutes with all three songs together, so it's a little bit longer. There's a lot of actual like orchestral sounds to it, so it's orchestral ensemble to it. So it's much different than Joni Mitchell's, and that's going to be a good compare and contrast and kind of how the lyricism throughout the song sequence goes. This is going to be more of like introducing a new way to have music. It doesn't just have to be a short song. It can go like very long. It can have movements in it. And so we're going to really kind of touch on that and touch on like the importance of music and the lyrics as artful expression. And what about multiple forms at once? Does mixing make it more therapeutic? Well, it might. It might make it more therapeutic. It might just make it more therapeutic for one person because they need both itch and scratch at the same time with the words and the music. This is really going to be the imperative tool. Comparative tool. We're going to talk about medium a lot with this and how the different genres of music change the tone so much and why you couldn't really change the tone that much without it completely changing the whole vibe of the message. And they're both, Joni Mitchell's song and Kansas's songs, these are actually from the early to mid 70s, so they're from roughly the same era, but Joni Mitchell's song is actually older, so more people actually might know this than they might know Joni Mitchell's, even though I would bet the opposite way, truly. And then essential questions, is music as important as the words? Do we think the music intensifies the emotional state of the author? How does it compare to For Free? What, do you like that decision that there's movements? Do you like that there's multiple songs? Or do you want it to all just be one giant long 20-minute song? What do you think? And like, how is this a therapeutic process? Like, can it be considered therapeutic on the artist's end? Because while there's an argument for it, there's an argument against it. And so it will be really cool to kind of compare and contrast, what students think on that. Is this really more of a therapeutic thing, or is it, hey, this is just something I've been through? Kind of that line, where you draw the line where it's, therapeutic, but when it's also just creative. And then our final text is going to be the film Speak, directed by Catherine Hardwicke. And this is going to be the text that really kind of rounds everything out because this film it's based on a book. There will be talk of the book and everything, and book versus graphic novel versus film, even though the film is really what we're going to be focusing on, and kind of film as one of those mediums. What can be done in film that cannot be done in novels, and what can kind of be accomplished emotionally in film that can't be accomplished in novels. There is, that overlap of music and again mixing mediums and making the mediums, stacking on top of each other and seeing what we can create and what message we can give off with all of that. This one's going to be very controversial as well because it does deal with sexual assault and it does deal with being bullied for being sexually assaulted, but like what happened. Um, and it deals with, like silence and regaining your voice. It's a very deep, heavy message. And the main character is only 14 years old. She's going through a lot. So it's going to be a really good way to have a harder conversation, but this is also our window into the more traditional sense of art as therapy, like drawing and painting and everything. So that's a lot more what this film focuses on. Because everything else is going to be a lot more, like how is the music structured? How is this type of poetry structured? Why is this memoir good? Why is nonfiction good? This is going to be like, what can we do in film and how can art therapy in film encapsulate so much more than it could in a book sometimes? And, how those highs and lows are in film compared to the book, in a book. So. And these are essential questions. How does this text really will kind of inform a lot of other texts, or it's going to bring, other ideas from previous texts back. What can be accomplished in film? Why is it so necessary to have safe adults in our life? Because a really big thing in this one as well, in this text as well, is neglectful parents, much like in Girl Interrupted and Ordinary Hazards. But this one has a very clear arc with using art as therapy, and that's going to be the good rounding off point in kind of like helping students come to like their final conclusions, get your thoughts in order, and what do you guys really think about all of this stuff. And these are a bunch of other alternative mediums that we haven't even discussed, and we've already gone over so many different mediums that there'll probably be a point in time where we'll be able to go over all of these and kind of different ways to do things, finger painting versus using coffee grounds for the projects and everything. There would just be so many ideas flown around about how to be artistic. That's really like the main thing. How are we artistic and how does it affect our lives? And does our art help our lives? Does it make it worse? Like, in what areas can this be overdone and done the right way? And then, we'll have final thoughts, final prompts. There will be a reflection and everything, but it will, it's going to kind of go back to our original questions and kind of ask a little more broadly, like, hey, what did you learn? What didn't you learn? What did you like? What didn't you like? Really give me your full final opinion. And so, any further questions and resources, any further questions here, it can all be sent to my page or to my email. And then, here's more about art therapy from Ted. And here's some supplemental material for Joni Mitchell and kind of that talk about different classes and, what's it like to do art for free? Should we do art for free? And kind of helping more so to deconstruct the like tortured artist trope and why it's not romantic and it should not be romanticized, much like with Girl Interrupted. It is more supplemental material, so kind of read through it. There will be a lot of different ideas in it that people can go through, and if they have any questions, that's kind of going to be part of where we go from. If you have any questions about like what are some of the ideas, a lot of them are going to be in there. More of the finer tuned ideas. And these are all of my references. And thank you very much.